وأن هذا العلم مخصوص بما قد شاع فيه عند كل العلماء.
الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين أما بعد. Welcome dear viewer to Istiqamah TV, where we continue in our Seerah series that we began in the month of Ramadan and we continue to the end of the biography of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we last stopped at the Hijrah, the beginnings of the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a migration and a journey from Mecca to Medina, a journey that will change the course of history forever, a journey that will seal the fates of all messengers and all prophets, a journey that will complete the messages from Allah Azza wa Jal to His creation, a journey that will complete the revelation of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to be read, to be contemplated, to be acted upon, and to be spread until the Day of Judgment. This journey of the Hijrah will change the course of history forever. So here we will take some of the events that took in the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we mentioned in our last episode that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam alongside Abu Bakr went to the Mount Thawr, the mountain called Mount Thawr, and they waited at the cave for 3 days until they met their guide that they had made an appointment with to meet here at this mountain, and his name was Abdullah ibn Urayqit. And he was not a Muslim at that time, but he was trusted by Abu Bakr to be a trustworthy guide that would not betray their trust and hand them over to the kuffar of Quraysh. Likewise, along with them was the servant of Abu Bakr, Amir ibn Fuhayrah. So the four of them set out in their journey to Medina. And you have to remember now, the Prophet ﷺ at this stage in his life is 53 years old. He's 53 years old. He's already completed now 13 years of prophethood. 13 years as a prophet in Mecca. 10 whole years he was calling to Tawheed alone. And that was his main task. And that was the task of all of the messengers and the prophets before him. وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. Allah Azza wa Jal here explaining that He sent a messenger to every nation to command them with the worship of Allah and to stay away from obeying or worshipping the Taghut, those false deities. So this was the main task of the Prophet ﷺ. Na'am, the affair of Salah was revealed in the 10th year of the Hijrah. But apart from that, the Zakah was not obligated yet. The Hijab was not obligated yet. The staying away from Khamr and alcohol and the likes was not made wajib yet and haram yet. So a lot of the legislations in Mecca were not revealed yet. They used to pray even before Al-Isra wal-Mi'raj, before the 10th year, but it was not wajib, it was not obligatory, and it was not 5 times a day. Likewise, they used to give zakah, but it was not the zakah that we know that is wajib today. Rather, it was voluntary, and it was something that they were recommended to do. And the other acts, like being a person who ties the ties of kinship and connects the family unions and ties, and respectful to the elders, and does not oppress the weak, and the likes, all were mawjood and were around in the time of Mecca. And we know this from the ahadith that was spread and from the some of the accounts of the Sahaba themselves, like Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, when he went to King Najashi in Ethiopia. He mentioned some of these things, and this all took place before the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. طيب. Now, in this journey of the Hijrah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, instead of taking the route that people usually take, the known route to Medina, there was a specific known route that you would take to go to Medina. They took the opposite way. So instead of exiting Mecca, from the closest point of Mecca to Medina, they exited from the south, the opposite direction. And they took that direction as a diversion, as a to stray away those followers that are looking after them. Because remember now, the kuffar of Quraysh are looking for the Prophet ﷺ and his companion Abu Bakr, and they've made a prize money for whoever finds the two of them, and that prize money was 100 camels for the head of each of those two. 100 camels for the person who found the Prophet ﷺ, and 100 camels for the person who found Abu Bakr. And this is not a small amount, rather this is a large amount of money. Especially the camels was one of those, and it's still till today, something that is not cheap, something that can reach large sums of money. And you have to compare it to those camels to, imagine someone telling you, if you did such and such or found such and such, I will give you a car worth £100,000, a Ferrari or a Bugatti or a Porsche or the likes, £100,000. That's how you have to think of it. And that's what they were being promised, the person who finds the Prophet ﷺ. 100 camels. 100 camels. And the camels was something treasured in the times, in the Arabs, in those times, and is still till today. Something that is very prized and expensive in that quantity. طيب. So the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr and their guide Abdullah ibn Urayqit and Abu Bakr's servant, the four of them set out on their journey. And in this journey of theirs, they made their journey at night and they would rest in the day. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu at one time met a shepherd, and the shepherd offered him some milk and the likes, and he would ask Abu Bakr about the Prophet ﷺ who was resting, and he would ask him, who is this companion of yours? And Abu Bakr would reply to him and to anyone else they met on their way that would ask, he would say, this is my guide. That the Messenger ﷺ, he would say about him, this is my guide. What they would understand is that he's their guide for the journey, to show them how to get to Medina, to show them the way. But what Abu Bakr intended is that he is my guide to righteousness. He's my guide in my religion. And that is something that is true. But he would tell them something that they would misunderstand, so they do not capture them and take them to the kuffar of Quraysh. طيب. Then after that, the Prophet ﷺ, they continued on their journey. The Prophet ﷺ woke up in the morning, of course, and he drank that milk, and they continued on their journey. They went by two isolated tents in the desert. And you have to remember, you have to imagine the scenery right now. There is no petrol stations, there is no breaks in the journey like we have today in the motorway and the likes. In those times, they would have something similar, which is tents of Bedouin people living on the road. And some of those Bedouins, they would have with them livestock from goats or sheep and the likes, or camels, and they would feed them to the travelers on their way. Because these people are traveling for days, not hours, rather days. And it's calculated that the journey from Mecca to Medina is roughly a 10 days journey. A 10 days journey. So imagine walking for 10 days or being on a camel for 10 days. And of course, it doesn't matter how much provisions you bring with you, especially being hunted after, those provisions are going to run dry, especially water. So these tents or these places that they would pass by would serve as what we would know today as being those breakpoints, those service stations that we have of today, where you would stop and get some refreshments, get some water, maybe use the toilet and the likes. So these tents could be considered something of a service station in those times. So they stopped by these two tents. And the woman that lived here was called Ma'bad al-Khuza'iyya. And we talked about Khuza'ad. Khuza'ad was the tribe that was, they used to govern Mecca once upon a time. Once upon a time, we mentioned that in episode 1. So this lady Ma'bad al-Khuza'iyya, she came and she was a polite woman, and she would help out any guests that were on a journey. so she would offer them water and refreshments and let them rest. But it was a rainless year that year, and her goats were already out with her husband Abu Ma'bad pasturing, and she only had one goat left, and that goat was almost dry. So she already presented her excuse to the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr that she only had a goat and the goat was almost dry, and it was been a rainless year and they don't have much to offer already. So the Prophet ﷺ asked her to bring the goat, and the Prophet ﷺ, and this being a miracle from Allah Azza wa Jal upon the hand of the Prophet ﷺ, that he milked the goat and the milk came out plentifully. A lot of milk would come out from that goat. And the first bowl of milk that the Prophet ﷺ got from the goat, he offered it to the owner itself, Ma'bad. And this was from the good mannerisms of the Prophet ﷺ. That number one, she is the host, but he knows her situation. It's been a rainless year, and this goat of hers has not been producing much milk and was almost dry at the moment. So he offered it to her first, and she had that milk. And then the Prophet ﷺ milked the goat again, up until all of the travelers that were with him, the three other people that were with him, Abu Bakr, Amir, and Abdullah ibn Urayqit, they all drank to their fill, and the Prophet ﷺ had some. And then the Prophet ﷺ, for the third time, milked the goat and gave the remainder of the milk, the full bowl of milk, left it with the lady. And they took their refreshments and they rested, and then they continued upon their journey. The Prophet ﷺ continued upon his journey. The husband of this woman, Abu Ma'bad, returned after they had already departed. When Abu Ma'bad had returned, he was surprised to see the milk and what was around from refreshments. So Ma'bad explained to him what took place and how a wonderful man came, and she described him to him and what she saw. Then Abu Ma'bad said to her, being interested at what she's saying, describe this man to me. And she described his physique, his characteristics, and we'll talk about this later on in the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. And she mentioned his beautiful mannerisms and good conduct that she saw from him, and how he was with his companions and how his companions were with him. So Abu Ma'bad, being very delighted at this, said, this is the man that I have been hearing about. Remember, word travels fast, especially if you're living in an area where a lot of travelers are gonna come by you. So he had heard of the word that Quraysh is looking for a man, and that they're giving 200 camels for whoever finds the two of them. So he said, this is the man that Quraysh are looking for. Wallahi, this is the man that the Quraysh are looking for. If indeed I was to meet him, I would join him. And he had great admiration for the Prophet ﷺ, and said that if he was to meet him, that he would follow and join the Prophet ﷺ and become from his followers and become from the Muslimin. Tayyib. This man, in some narrations, it mentions that he wrote some lines of poetry talking about the Prophet ﷺ coming past their two tents and how they're on their journey to Medina and the likes. And in some narrations, it says, and the poetry that he wrote, it echoed in the cities of Mecca. And in some narrations, it says that a voice, not the voice of a human being, perhaps it was a jinn, they say, it echoed in, perhaps from the Muslim jinn, that it echoed in the cities of Mecca the following. So one of the narrations says, this is what Abu Ma'bad wrote, and some of them say that is actually a jinn explaining to them what had taken place. So the following was said, Lord Allah, Lord of the people, bless those two companions who reached the tent of Ma'bad. This is what is echoing in the city of Mecca. And remember, the Prophet ﷺ, he left Ali radiallahu anhu. He left Asma bint Abu Bakr, the daughter of Abu Bakr, Aisha bint Abu Bakr. And other believers were still left, Suhaib, they were still left in Mecca. They had not made that journey yet. So now they're hearing this in the cities of Mecca. Someone saying, may Allah bless those two companions that reached the tent of Ma'bad. those two companions being the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. In safety they broke their journey, and in safety they resumed it, they continued. Anyone who befriends Muhammad finds success. O Quraysh, by driving Muhammad away, you have fortified glory and dominion. Blessed is the tribe of Bani Ka'ab. Their lady's tent became a refuge for Muhammad. Ask your lady about the weak goat and the milking bowl. The goat will inform you if you ask it. So here it just mentions some description of what took place in that journey, of how there was a dry goat and the Prophet ﷺ came and he milked it, and the miracle of the milk coming out plentifully even though the goat was dry, and that Ma'bad's tent is still there. So if you want to see this and hear it for this account for yourself, then go to the tent of Ma'bad and you will know of this. This was something that Asma bint Abu Bakr heard and the rest of the Muslims heard. So she realized straight away that Alhamdulillah, that they had not been captured yet by the Kuffar of Quraysh, and Na'am, that they were on their journey to Medina in safety. So this was like a bushra, this was like a little glad tidings for those that were left behind in Mecca from the believers. And then after this, another event took place in the journey, in the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. So now we continue in this topic of the Hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ, the journey from Mecca to Medina. Another event took place in the Hijrah. A man by the name of Suraqa ibn Malik, he came and he followed the Prophet ﷺ. And in some narrations, he is talking about this himself, the journey, how it took place. He said that some of his companions, they were talking about the wanted, as they call them, fugitives, they were wanted, the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. And they said that they saw a people over there, that they saw a people in that direction. Perhaps they are those that Quraysh are looking for. So Suraqa said to himself, perhaps it is. But to them he said, no, it's not them. It is so and so, they came out with us, don't you remember, they are such and such and such. And what's his intent? His intent is, let me divert these people that are with me so they don't go over there, and let me go there by myself, find them, capture them, bring them back to Quraysh, and then I get 200 camels for myself. That's the intent of Suraqa ibn Malik when he said this to those people sitting with him. And then he left them to his house. As soon as he came home, he said to his slave girl, get my horse ready, get my stuff ready. So he got his horse ready and his arrow ready. And he went, or his spear, and he went into that direction looking for the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. And just as he had predicted, it was the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr. It was Abu Bakr and the Prophet ﷺ in that direction. When he came closer, the Prophet ﷺ lem yaltafit. He did not turn around. He did not look back to see who is there. But Abu Bakr, and this is something normal, and perhaps every single one of us would have done worse. Abu Bakr kept looking back. The man is getting closer. Kept looking back. The Prophet ﷺ was silent, reciting Quran. As soon as Suraqa ibn Malik thought that he was in a close distance of the Prophet ﷺ, he came and the Prophet ﷺ recited some dua, and his horse knelt into the ground. Allah Azza wa Jalla accepting the dua of the Prophet ﷺ, and he got stuck. Then he got out in some narrations and he went again. The Prophet ﷺ read a dua, and his horse got stuck in the ground, in the sand, for a second time. And then he knew that this was from the dua of the Prophet ﷺ against him. So he said, O Muhammad, indeed I have surrendered. So the Prophet ﷺ made dua that he be freed, and Allah Azza wa Jalla accepted the dua, and his horse began riding again. And in some narrations it says that he stopped for them and he gave them some provisions, and the Prophet ﷺ did not take it from him. And then he asked for a parchment of security in case of any, for the future, that he might need it. So Prophet ﷺ commanded Amir, the servant of Abu Bakr, to write down this parchment of security, of safety, and he wrote it and he gave it to him. And Suraqa, he told them that he would tell the others that are looking for him in this direction, he will tell them that I've searched this whole area and I cannot find anybody. So he went back and he left the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, I've searched this area and it's clear, don't go there. I've already searched it. So he did so, and it took off some heat and the search of the Prophet ﷺ in that direction. Then the Prophet ﷺ continued on his journey, and on his journey there that he met Buraidah. He met the tribe of Buraidah, and in that the tribe of Bani Buraidah, and from them was Buraidah ibn Husayb and 70 or 60 odd men, all of them already embracing Islam. So they stayed in their position and they gave some refreshments to the Prophet ﷺ, and they prayed with the Prophet ﷺ the night prayer, and the Prophet ﷺ led, and then the Prophet ﷺ continued upon his journey. They were to later join the Prophet ﷺ after the battle of Uhud. And then the Prophet ﷺ, likewise, he met in his journey to Medina, he met another person called Abu Tamim Aus ibn Hajar. And at that time, the Prophet ﷺ, for some reason, and Abu Bakr were riding one horse together. Perhaps the other horse, something happened to it, Allahu Alam. It doesn't mention in the narrations, but they were riding one horse together, Abu Bakr and the Prophet ﷺ. So Abu Tamim Aus ibn Hajar, he gave them a second horse, and likewise he gave them his son Mas'ud to aid them, or not his son, rather a servant to aid them in their journey called Mas'ud, and he followed the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr, Amir and Abdullah bin Urayqit, and they continued upon their journey. Then when they had reached close to Medina, they had met Zubayr ibn Awwam. Zubayr ibn Awwam, already from the Muslimin of Mecca, he had already become a Muslim, but he travelled to Syria and he had a caravan of trade with him, and they met with him on his journey back, and he went with the Prophet ﷺ and embraced him, and they went together to Yathrib, Yathrib being the old name of Medina. So they continued up until they were close to Medina. طيب. Now in Medina, the Muslims were waiting for the arrival of the Prophet ﷺ. Every day they would go out in groups, looking, searching, looking from afar or high places for the Prophet ﷺ. When they had become tired, they would go back. So upon one of these days, they did what they would do. They come out looking for the Prophet ﷺ, looking from high places if the Prophet ﷺ has come yet. When they had become tired, they went back to their abodes and their homes. A Jew climbed up a high place and he saw a group of people journeying with white clothes and the like. So he shouted out, "O Arabs, O Arabs, here is the man that you have been waiting for. Here is the man that you have been waiting for." So the Prophet ﷺ and Abu Bakr and the three other men that were with him were now entering into the city of Mecca. The Muslimun had come out with the families and their swords, and the Prophet ﷺ entered Yathrib safely. طيب. When you come into Yathrib, Medina, the old name being Yathrib, there was Quba, and the Quba was on the outskirts in those times. Now it's part of Medina, and it's perhaps the inner part of Medina, but in those times Quba was considered from the outskirts. So the Prophet ﷺ, he stayed in Quba for a number of 4 days. They say in some narrations that he stayed in the house of Kulthum ibn Hadam, and in some narrations it says in the house of Sa'd ibn Khaythama or Khathima. Tayyib, he stayed in one of these two. He stayed there for 4 days, and they laid the foundation of Masjid Quba. They laid the foundations of it. And the masjid where it is till today in 2020, 1441, the Prophet ﷺ's masjid, the Masjid Quba that they laid foundations for, is still in its same position. That was a Friday, and then the Prophet ﷺ left with Abu Bakr, and he sent a message to Bani Najjar. And Bani Najjar is his family members from his mother's side. So he sent a message to them, and they went on their journey to Medina itself, inside, because Quba was on the outskirts. So they arrived, they entered into Medina after the Friday prayer. They prayed the Friday prayer in the settlements of Bani Salim ibn Auf. The Prophet ﷺ led 100 people in this settlement, Bani Salim ibn Auf. He prayed there, and after the Salat al-Jum'ah, he went with his companions, and they went on their journey, or they continued going towards Medina, and the Prophet ﷺ was upon the camel, and the families of the people, the Ansar, who were called Ansar, which literally means helpers, and they were consisting of the two tribes of the Arabs living in Medina, Al-Aws wal Khazraj. They were called Ansar, the helpers. So they would come, and they would all want to host the Prophet ﷺ. So some of them would say, try to take the camel of the Prophet ﷺ, come to us, stay with us. And another will come from this side, come to us, stay with us. And the Prophet ﷺ would say, دعها فإنها مأمورة. Leave her, leave the she-camel, for indeed she is being guided by Allah. So the camel would continue to go forward up until the camel knelt at a specific position. Then the Prophet ﷺ did not dismount, and he stayed upon the camel. And then the camel went up again, and he knelt upon the same position. This position was to be, and the Prophet ﷺ said, this is where we're going to build a masjid, the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Masjid al-Nabawi, where it is today, that's where it started from, where the she-camel knelt upon, and it was guided by Allah Azza wa Jal. So this is where Allah Azza wa Jal wanted the masjid to be built, and that is where the Prophet ﷺ started building the masjid. And this land was already owned to Bani Najjar, if I'm not mistaken, and they offered to give this for free to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ refused. Kama ja'at fi Sunan Nasa'i, just has been narrated in the book of Sunan Nasa'i. The Prophet ﷺ bought it after, and this land where it was going to be the future masjid, there were within it some palm trees, there were within it some graves, and there were some other stuff. So the graves had to be dug up and moved. The palm trees had to be moved somewhere else likewise, and now the masjid was, the Prophet ﷺ bought the masjid from them, and it was to become the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. Next to the masjid, they began building likewise two houses, one for the Prophet ﷺ's wife Sauda, and another for Aisha radiallahu anha, who he had married but had not yet lived with. She still lived with her parents. Then, as we were mentioning, all of the Ansar, the people of Medina, wanted to host the Prophet ﷺ, and they were trying to take it this way, that way. When the camel knelt upon that position, everybody else was focused on other things apart from the saddle and the bag of the Prophet ﷺ carrying his stuff. Everyone else was focused on the camel, right? Whereas Abu Ayyub al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, who was clever, he took the saddle of the Prophet ﷺ and it's the things that the Prophet ﷺ was carrying. He took that and he took it to his house. Whilst everyone's focusing on the camel, he took that and he took it to his house. And he said, Indi, he said, you're with me, O Messenger ﷺ. And he had his saddle. The Prophet ﷺ laughed and he said, a man is with his saddle. A man must go where his saddle is, where his belongings are. So the Prophet ﷺ stayed with Abu Ayyub al-Ansari until the masjid was being built and his house was being built. In this time period where the Prophet ﷺ would stay with Abu Ayyub al-Ansari, some say it was a month or 2 months, every other night some of the Ansar would come with food, trying to host the Prophet ﷺ and try to bring gifts or the likes to the Prophet ﷺ, trying to show that the Prophet ﷺ, you are very welcome here and we are happy at your arrival to Medina. We are happy at your arrival in Medina. طيب. Likewise, at the same time, after the Prophet ﷺ departed from Mecca, Ali radiallahu anhu, he departed 3 days after the departure of the Prophet ﷺ from Mecca. Ali likewise began his Hijrah, began his journey from Mecca to Medina, and he arrived safely, and he met the Prophet ﷺ whilst he was still staying in Quba. Those 4 days he was in Quba, Ali arrived, Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu arrived. Likewise, others from the family members of the Prophet ﷺ arrived later on. So 6 months later, Zayd ibn Haritha, the freed slave of the Prophet ﷺ, arrived alongside Abu Rafi', another companion of the Messenger ﷺ, and they came with the Prophet ﷺ's family, his children, Fatima, Kulthum, Sauda, Ayman, Usama bin Zayd being the son of Zayd ibn Haritha, and Abdullah ibn Abu Bakr, along Abu Bakr's family, his wife Ruman, Aisha and Asma, whom they had all left in Mecca. So they had all arrived in the next 6 months. Likewise, from those that arrived was a wealthy Sahabi by the name of Suhaib. Suhaib had arrived, and he was being prevented by the Kuffar of Quraysh. But Alhamdulillah, after the migration of the Prophet ﷺ, it gave a new light, a new breath of Muslims migrating from Mecca to Medina, and eventually he arrived, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, to Medina from Mecca. طيب. Not all of the Muslims were able to make that journey. Some of them were being prevented by the Kuffar of Quraysh and other reasons. So not all of them were able to make that journey, but majority of them had done so. And this is where we will stop for today's episode. And inshallah, in the next episode, we'll talk about what took place at the beginning of the Prophet ﷺ in his first year, what took place, and some of the difficulties that they faced, and how the Prophet ﷺ made some decisions in order to help those new coming Muslims that made Hijrah to Medina from Mecca. So now in Medina, we have Al-Muhajirun and Al-Ansar. The Sahaba are split into these two. So the Muhajirun are those people that were from Mecca originally and made that journey from Mecca to Medina for Allah's sake alone. And the Ansar, they were those people residing in Medina that were helping the Prophet ﷺ and his brothers and family men and tribe and companions from Mecca, who came from Mecca to Medina, and the Ansar made them welcome there, and that's why they were called the Ansar. And we will stop here. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.